fam? We are live. How's everyone doing? Hope everyone's pretty great. Can't complain myself except for I got in an accident today, which unfortunately was unfortunate. The lady out right in front of me backed out. Bam! Right before work. It was unfortunate, like I said many times, but I have everything set up. It's gonna get taken to the shop. Most likely, her insurance is gonna pay for it just because it wasn't my fault. She was technically at fault, but we'll see what she says on her statement. Lesson for myself is I need to get a dash cam just so I have footage of all this. I actually thought about getting a dash cam, but unfortunately I didn't. But that is a lesson I had to learn. All right. As far as updates, nothing too crazy. I mean, besides that and a couple other stuff has been pretty crazy today. But nonetheless, we keep working, we grinding, we keep hustling, always working, hashtag always working, and we make the best of it. All right, so let's go ahead and hop into the topic at hand today. I do have a guest with me. Let me unmute him for a second. Uh, this guest I've known for a while, and I guess you can decide how much you want to introduce about yourself or talk about yourself. Whatever you're comfortable with is fine, but we're going to be talking about specifically the pressure of marriage within the church. And by the church, I mean like my religion, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I guess you could probably apply this generally to a lot of just different sects of Christianity in general, most likely. But like to let's see if everything's working technically.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, let me boost your volume up a little bit.
Yeah. So pleasure to be on this stream. Yeah, I've known Michael
You're actually the
for
best we've ever
what
had.
was that?
You're the first guest
First
we've ever had.
first
This
guest.
is
Look at
quite the
that.
accomplishment.
There we go. Yeah, I've known Michael since about well, August, September of 2015. So coming on 9 years, 8.5 years. It's been a good time. We met uh, at university, at Brigham Young University, just playing basketball in the RB. Kind of just hit it off. Our love for basketball, um, Mexican food, specifically rancheritos. If you know, you know. And a little bit of the 2K. So yeah, that was freshman year, and we've known each other ever since, and developed our friendship, and stayed really good friends.
Yeah, good times for sure. Freshman year, those were simpler times. Didn't really have to worry about anything. That was right before the mission and everything. And yeah, we basically just hooped, played 2K, and ate food. And also a little bit of school here and there. But and then also chasing chicks. That's definitely what we did freshman year. Uh, that
Certainly
yeah,
thrive.
great, crazy times, fun times. You enjoy those times when you're older. It's like the, the best times in life, or when you can just hang around with your boys. You're not really necessarily doing anything in particular, but you're just hanging out, talking about old stories that you had. Like that's the ultimate experience a guy can have. Like that moment is just this moment for sure. But um, both of us are gonna, like you mentioned, we both went to BYU, and we are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with it, I talk about it a lot in my lives, just because it is a big part of my life in particular, and it's something that's really important, and it's really kind of what makes me the person I am. And I try to definitely, what's the word? Not necessarily educate. I don't know if educate is necessarily the correct word, but teach people about stuff that's correct about what we believe and maybe stuff that's not correct about what we believe, and just enlighten. I guess that's a good word. Enlighten people about the church and their members, and just because a lot of my experiences and probably a lot of other members' experiences It's been, oh, you're a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or like most people know them as the Mormon Church, which we like to be known as the the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Uh, and people all the time are like, "Oh, but aren't I thought you were supposed to be like this old-fashioned guy, like you have a bunch of wives and stuff like that," and that's not the case nowadays. So, kind of enlightening people to know the truth about what we believe in. And to be honest, if you break down pretty much any religion, especially Christianity, it all gets broken same principle, fundamentals and teachings of Jesus Christ, obviously, and probably agree on, I'd say 90% of stuff. You'd probably agree with me, right?
Yeah, I feel like most definitely. Like, we believe in the Bible to be the Word of God, as well as the Book of Mormon, another testament of Jesus Christ. So we have a lot of things, in common with other Christianity sects, as you mentioned. But um, I don't know, people nowadays just tend to be more combative, and they try to focus on the things that separate us as opposed to things that unite us. And we our church, I feel like, does a really good job at including uh, other religions. I know we're pushing a lot for religious freedom because we feel like that's being under attack right now. So yeah, I feel like as we focus on the things that we have in common, we just make the world a better place.
Exactly. And I think there's a balance that I really respect and admire about the church is we are very accepting and very loving towards people of other faiths, other ways of thinking, other ideologies, but at the same time we uphold our standards and we kind of set what we believe in, and I think that's really important. Not in just specifically religion, but I think in life people need to set boundaries. That doesn't mean that someone who maybe believes contrary is a bad person per se or wrong per se, but it's something that we hold ourselves to a certain standard that we believe in and a certain set of beliefs and certain, I guess, what you would call commandments or teachings or guidelines to live by. And I think the more people can, in general, it doesn't necessarily have to be all the same standards, principles, and guidelines, but just a set of standards, the better society will become. Because I always have this thought is if you have no standards or you don't have any guidance, then it's just like you're kind of like a belief in all things is like no belief at all. Like you don't stand for anything if you're like the leaf in the wind. You're getting blown this way, that way. So I think there's a really good thing to have a set of guidelines and a set of standards to live by, whatever those
Yeah,
may be.
for sure. As we say, how firm a foundation, right?
Exactly. Well, I first kind of wanted to start off with just what general our church believes in, and from coming from like marriage, and it's like why do we deem it super important, and maybe a little bit of doctrine surrounding that. We're not going to focus necessarily a ton of that, but I think it is very important that we kind of set the standard and set the context of the discussion, because we are coming from a context that we are members of this church, and these are the things that we believe in, that we try to uphold and try to achieve for ourselves. And these are the reasons behind it. And a mixture of it comes from scripture, mixture of it comes from our leaders of the church. And not gonna get into all the weeds of like who said this and who is that person type of a thing, but just general stuff we believe in. First, starting off with kind of, we believe that marriage is between a man and woman ordained of God, that and also that family is central to kind of the creator's plan, or what we call the plan of happiness. And this is a direct quote from a document called the Family Proclamation. That marriage between a man and a woman is ordained of God, that family is central to the creator's plan for the eternal destiny of his children. So honestly, in a nutshell, if I had to end it there, it would probably, that's like a really good explanation. And especially when it comes to marriage and family, to kind of see what we believe in, read this document by the church. It's called the Proclamation to the World, or Family Proclamation to the World. I can't remember the exact like title of it. and a couple of other things, and my guest can add in if he has anything else he would like to add. But also, part or adding on to that, marriage is one of those steps that we, or it's kind of, I wouldn't necessarily deem it a commandment per se, but it's one of those steps that you take that really allows you to, by getting married, it allows you to be uh, have the ability to kind of reach the highest kingdom of heaven, as we call it, the celestial kingdom. Exaltation, it's like the highest of high, living basically with God. So marriage is kind of a requirement in order to reach that ultimate state of happiness living with God. And then also, big churches, obviously big proponent. One of the commandments that God gives us is to replenish the earth. So raising children is definitely, I'd say, already that's talked a lot about in the church. And then also specifically within marriage, raising those children. And you could even look at it statistically as well. It's like children that are raised in a two-parent household that are married have way better statistics of success in life. Whereas the contrary, maybe a single parent household, especially males, you're much more likely to be incarcerated. You're much more likely to get addicted to drugs. Way more likely to have a kid out of wedlock. So all this maybe not as good stuff can definitely be avoided and mitigated by the raising of children within a two-parent household, specifically being married. So those are kind of some core things that the church kind of believes in, or we believe in as members of that church. Anything my guest would like to add, or any
Yeah,
comments on that?
yeah, no, I definitely agree. I mean, just beyond, whether or not you believe in an afterlife or not. I know you talked about, um, in our church, we believe that, like, yeah, getting married allows you to reach the highest uh, kingdom in heaven. But I think I saw a quote from one of our leaders who has since passed away. So, like, the greatest work you'll ever do is within the walls of your home. Then there's another one, like, the things that matter the most last the longest. And, a big saying in our church is families are forever. So I feel like, marriage and the subsequent children within a marriage is super important to us. We place a high emphasis on it.
I love it. Yeah, I 100% agree, and I agree with this. I mean, you can even look at this statistically as well. Like we were talking about the raising of children within the family. Obviously, everyone's situation might not look like that, and it doesn't mean that someone being raised in a family situation that's not a two-parent household and they're married means you're like doomed. It's not the case at all. But statistically, you are much more likely to succeed in the two-parent household. But like I said, there's always exceptions to the rules, and that doesn't mean that you're going to necessarily be one of those people. But odds are not in your favor. Let's just say that. And especially us people and like us Gen Z, millennials, Gen Alpha, whatever gens they're calling it nowadays. It's like kind of our responsibility to, all right, we kind of see all of these statistics and see maybe the negative stuff that comes from a consequence of maybe our not so good choices, and we can move forward and look at the data, kind of see what works, see what maybe not doesn't work as well, and choose to do what works to have a greater chance of success, not only for us and for us as parents or having a family, but especially for our kids. Like it's the number one thing that parents in general, I'd say, want to do is to set their kids up to succeed. No one wants to set their kid up to fail.
Yeah, most definitely.
All right, let's get into the question at hand that it's a very interesting question. I think it's a discussion that definitely should be facilitated for sure. In everything in life, I think there needs to be discussion and debate on stuff. Not necessarily to say one thing's bad or wrong, but to share opinions about stuff and to kind of get to the core of maybe I don't know if I wouldn't call this topic necessarily an issue, but certain topics, certain points of view, and people can kind of get out of it what they need to get out of it and they can make informed decisions in the future. So, why is there, specifically within the church, so our religion, we typically say the church as in like members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter day Saints, much like Catholic people say the church um, in their context. So I'm saying the church as in Church of Jesus Christ of Latter day Saints. Why is there, well, maybe this is a better question to ask first, is there pressure to get married early, or is there maybe not as that pressure to get married early?
I feel like there is definitely pressure to get married. I mean, first and foremost, just talking from a physical or biological standpoint, we as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints believe in chastity. So that means no sexual relations outside of marriage between a man and a woman. So there definitely is, as time passes by, we have, those natural urges in our bodies given to us by God. So as more times passes, but you become more and more, as they call it, sexually frustrated. Um,
Yep,
so
those
that's probably one of the.
hormones, those hormones are kicking in, and I want this to be clear to especially you guys out there. Um, just like exactly what my guest said, if you're a member, we abide by these guidelines, we abide by these commandments to stay chaste, stay sexually pure until marriage. Uh, but that doesn't mean the hormones you have and the urges that you get are necessarily a wrong thing. It's just like acting on those urges, just because it's completely natural as human beings, as any species that reproduces. Like it's natural to to get those hormones and to experience that stuff. I want to set that clear. A lot of unfortunately, and I think this has been in the past. I wouldn't say necessarily our church, but specifically the Catholic Church, maybe other churches back in the day. It was just like no, like any thoughts of doing anything sexual or whatever like that, or acting on your hormones or whatever is like banned. You should never think about it. If you think about it, you're dirty, you're unclean, type of a thing, and that is not the case.
Yeah, I know we definitely believe in chastity and not celibacy. So it's just,
Man, if
you
it was
know,
celibacy, I that would be a tough
yeah,
one.
yeah, just having the spirit, control the body, not the other way around. But yeah, I mean that's one of the reasons why they encourage us to get married and just get married sooner. Other ones just just with anything in life, whether you're growing up and they say it takes a village, you can just go a lot further, with somebody than by yourself, and you see it countless times. Um, with successful businessmen and businesswomen, they attribute a lot of their success to, their spouse and the support they provide them. It's not easy to start a business, and you know, people think you're always an overnight success when in reality, you might be spending countless nights, days, weeks, months, years, waiting to finally break through. And if you don't have, a support group, um, whether it's a family or in this case, a spouse to be able to support you and help you and encourage you to keep going, it can become difficult. So that's just talking in business, but just overall in life, just improving.
I agree, and you jumped straight into it. I think there is definitely an assumed pressure, and I like yes, there is pressure to get married, especially well, married in general for sure, and I think that's probably across the board, across all religions, and honestly across society until like probably a decade ago. Maybe not as much pressure nowadays with the way society is kind of moving towards especially on the women's side. You don't need no man. You do yourself. You're a boss, babe. And then honestly, recently, I'd say past like couple years with the rise of the manosphere, you got the Andrew Tates, you got the Justin Wallers, you got the Fresh and Fit, Myron and Fresh out here. You got the coach Greg Adams. Man, I know all these guys because I actually I watch a lot of these guys' content. I don't agree with everything they say. A lot of what they say is pretty based. Not gonna lie, but we've kind of the women with the whole feminism movement have moved towards, yeah, maybe not so much being married, and especially nowadays a lot of women are choosing like they don't even want kids, which I will say, if you don't want kids, perfectly fine for that. If you're like 20 years old and you say I never want to have kids, like give yourself a couple years. Your mind could definitely change for sure. And like women, men, same thing. So stuff changes when you're older. There, you can never say never. But specifically, that whole wave with feminism happened, and then we kind of have a resurgence of like men's activists that you have like the black pill, the men, the MGTOW guys with the men they go their own way. It's like, oh, the system, they think the system's rigged against them. They don't really want to enter the dating market. They don't ever want to get married. And it's just like not really interesting to them. Mainly, and I will say this because I'm not black pillar and I, I do criticize a lot of what they say is just because they don't they don't level themselves high enough to be able to give themselves a chance. But more so, the men are moving away from marriage, and it'll we might talk about this a little bit as well. But just there's reasons behind that, logical reasons. You could talk about marriage laws and stuff. I'm not going to talk about that and mention it right now, but in a society that's moving further and further away from marriage, ideally, and the church teaches this as well, men and women are better together than apart. And my guest mentioned that as well. If you want to go far, that tribe mentality, you gotta work with people. You gotta up. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. It's the old African proverb. But like I said, sorry, I went off on a long tangent, but you went into the whys. Why is there pressure getting married early? And that's exactly where I was going to go. And you mentioned try to keep this commandment called the law of chastity. And I will say, like logically speaking, this is, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. It can be a bad thing if it's solely the only reason why you're getting married. In my opinion, my guess could have differing opinions, and I would love to hear what they think. But if your only reason of getting married is just because you're like super horny and stuff, just because we do have that commandment, that I don't think is a good thing. And I will say that is I can't say the sole contributor of a lot of people getting married early. I cannot say that for a fact, but it definitely plays a part. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think statistically, Utah has the highest divorce rate. Obviously, a lot of factors go
Wait,
into
does it
that.
really?
Whether in the United States, last time, or last I was informed, it does have the highest divorce rate. But yeah, statistics can tell you whatever you want them to tell you. I'm pretty sure we do have the most. Well, Nevada might have us beat. Well, we're in the upper echelon of like most marriages occurring. But I guess we kind of lead in divorces, and I feel like a lot of factors can go into that, such as just getting married young and not really having experienced life. Um, the old like FOMO adage: you get married and you realize you still want to experience life, and you see your spouse as somebody who's holding you back, and you're like, I gotta undo this. As you mentioned, some people would choose to get married early because they want to fulfill those sexual urges. Once those urges are fulfilled, they realize that they're not actually in love with the person that they're marrying. So that definitely contributes to it. I think those are kind of the big two factors. I'm sure there's other factors that go into. why there's a lot of divorce between members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
That's really interesting. I actually didn't know that statistic about Utah. And that would be interesting. Unfortunately, and I'm actually going to say this at the end as well, but there's stats that I wish we had access to, but we just don't have access to. So it's like church specific stats. Like I 100% know they have these stats of like members of the church, the divorce rates, and maybe like the percentages of maybe people leaving the church or the reasons why people leave the church. Obviously, I can 100% understand why the church wouldn't publicly release those numbers. Um, it's probably just yeah, it's not smart to do that, but I would love to just see those numbers just purely for curiosity's sake, just because, like my guest said, I mean, numbers can tell you whatever you want. That's true. You can find numbers that tell you a certain story that you want to believe in. You're going to find numbers that are contrary. But I do think in general numbers are very important. Just to kind of see what the landscape is like. But that's really interesting that you brought that up. This is why I need to invite more guests in. That way, I'm just not in my own echo chamber, just talking to myself, thinking I know all the stats. But I thought, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I thought, and there might be a difference between obviously the whole state of Utah, just because that's a good representation of members of the church, but obviously not everyone in Utah are members of the church. But I could have sworn there was also a statistic. Granted, I don't know how old this is, and if maybe it's outdated. But if you were married in the temple, those had very low rates of divorce.
Yeah, I mean, the the statistic of Utah being the highest divorce rate. Um, I think we both took as part of like the BYU curriculum. There's certain religion classes you need to take to graduate. One of them kind of being a class focused on marriage and family life. So that's kind of where I gleaned that fact from. But yeah, the teacher pointed that out, addressed it that that is in fact reality. But he also broke down, uh, kind of like I said, about how statistics can be misleading or they don't tell the full story. He just broke down just specifically in Utah. Then if you're both active members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that statistic goes down. If you happen to be married in the temple, which to be married in the temple, you have to be living in accordance to specific commandments. Um, that statistic drops even more so, and I think the national average for divorce rates, you probably know it, Mike. Like it's maybe above 50%, below 60, like mid
Something
50s.
like that. And the numbers change all the time, and there's tons of different studies
And
that say
I think if you get married in the temple and you both continuously be active members of the church, worthy of being able to attend the temple, uh, I think the statistic drops all the way down to like low 20s, if not slightly higher, slightly lower. So cuts it in half.
yeah, and I mean that's a big thing, but I mean yeah, but that's still crazy to think that, and that is the world we live in, and we try to do everything that we can to mitigate those risks. But I know there are definitely lots of ear stuff you cannot reconcile that happens in marriage. That's just like it's just better to split. But even to think like 20%, so that's like 1/5. So 1 out of 5 marriages is going to get divorced if you get married in the temple. That's actually kind of crazy. But I think I 100% agree with what you said. If both spouses are kind of, we think of it as this triangle. We talk about in the teachings of we learn in our church, and you probably argue this is a whole Christianity thing, but it's like you have this triangle, and you have God at the top, and then you have each spouse at the side. So husband, wife, and it's like the closer you get to God, the you actually move closer together. And exactly like my guest was talking about, it's like you just kind of follow the teachings and you try wholeheartedly to abide by them and love your spouse and your partner. And I'm not going to say partner. Like I hate it when people say partner. Your husband or wife, because yeah, partner. And you may disagree with me. My guest may disagree with me.
Yeah, it could be a very loose term, and
Yeah, because when you
yeah,
think of partner, or at least generally nowadays, people say it so much that you might like, oh, okay, like your person you're with type of a thing. Uh, but when originally you kind of think of partner, it's like a business partner, which in a case like obviously your family can be seen as a business, but it's like maybe partners have different roles as well. You could argue that, but it's just I think it's better just this is my husband or this is my wife. I think it's a more elated title than just partner, you know?
yeah, if it's more gearing towards like political correctness when like
I
somebody
agree.
says like I hope you find, they don't say like I hope you find, your girl or your wife, or if it's a girl, I hope you find your husband or your boy. They say like I hope you find your person. And like it kind of just, I don't know, it doesn't, it takes the romance out of just the idea of it. Like go find your person.
Yeah, and that does go into a lot of like gender neutrality stuff that we're not going to get into. Not even worth getting into right now. Uh, but yeah, those are interesting statistics. I would probably also mention peer pressure is a big one too. It's not just like, all right, we got to follow the teachings of the church. Like I want to maybe meet my sexual needs, or I want to have kids. And it's very logical. It's like if you want to have a lot of kids, then you're going to have to obviously start earlier. Like that's the biological clock, natural biological clock in a woman. She can't have kids when she's 40 plus. I mean, like nowadays, people like freeze their eggs and stuff, but technically anything above 35 years old is a geriatric pregnancy, which is just higher in risk for both the baby and the woman giving birth to that baby. So it makes sense if you want to have a lot of kids, probably going to start younger, thus leading to getting married younger. But I will say men can always marry a younger woman. Obviously, there might be cultural or societal like limits to that. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I will agree. It's like we don't want like a 60-year-old man marrying a 20-year-old girl. Like yeah, no one really wants to see that much. But you could be a 35-year-old guy and marry a 22-year-old girl, and I think that's fine. So with guys, you have a little bit more flexibility. Unfortunately, you don't. That's just how it is. I'm sorry, but I do think there is a lot of peer pressure as well, and not only just from friends. It can, and it doesn't necessarily need to be actually verbal. Everyone has that aunt or uncle. Every single family reunion, every time your extended family gets together, they go, "Hey, how's dating going?" And my guest can probably attest to this. I attest to this as well. It doesn't bother me as much just because I'm following my purpose and I'm working at it, and it's not like I'm not dating, but like sometimes it does kind of get like a little bit annoying. Like I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, no, it definitely gets annoying. And you mentioned, it comes up not just for us, um, in our faith, but also like anyone, they'll go home and they'll be like, at Thanksgiving or Christmas, your distant aunt, distant uncle will ask, yeah, when are you getting married, or are you seeing anyone? Um, but for us, I feel like it only expounds just because of the church we belong to and how our congregation, or the members of our congregation, we're a lot more we're a lot closer with them because in our church we believe in trying to attend our church meetings every Sunday, so you get to know your members of your congregation. And because of that familiarity, they sometimes feel entitled to ask about your personal life and prod about it when it may not be their business. So you're receiving pressure from not only extended family, but also you know fellow members of your congregation. And you'll see that, you'll see other members uh, of your congregation go off and get married. And Utah is a very competitive state, and it's kind of like keeping up with the Joneses. So you see, John go and get married at 25 and have a kid at 26, and they're like, "What's wrong with you?"
Yeah, 100%. Like both of us have pretty close friends that are like obviously married, but I have some people I know that have like two or three kids already, same age, and just like uh, it's just different. It's different worlds. Honestly, it's pretty crazy to think. Like some of my siblings that are like 10 years older than me, they have like three or four kids, and like someone my age has the same amount of kids they have. It's kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah, most definitely. Just two different worlds. I have a close friend who, yeah, is slightly younger than me, and he has three kids. And the problems that I worry about, or the things that I get excited for, I get excited when, the new Batman movie comes out. He gets excited when, his son gets potty trained. So it's just completely different worlds.
I will say though, and this is not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. I think it's just like based off of my experience. And this doesn't mean that you should just like wait necessarily to focus on dating or whatever. Um, and I guess tonight we're not going to necessarily go into like, all right, what, like how to get married, just because that is a very, I don't even know if you can necessarily answer that question because it literally relies on someone else's agency. But I will say, when I become a husband and a father and I have kids or whatever, I think, and this is just purely objective, just purely anecdotal. Like, I'm sure many of my friends and many of your friends have much love for their kids, and they might even love their kids even more than I'll love my kids. But I think I'll have a different understanding of like, hey, this is like really what it means to be a father, just because it's like I spent a long time not being a father or something like that. And then now I'm actually to the opportunity, something that you're really looking forward to. Uh, and like I said, this is just like my take on like kind of like my life and not really trying to put other my words in like other people's mouths. But I have a lot of friends that just like that's not necessarily by accident, but they just like they would necessarily weren't necessarily trying to have a kid and they just had a kid and then they had another kid and like fatherhood was thrust upon them. I guess that's a good way of saying it.
Sure. Yeah.
All right. And we've been going for a while now, so let's kind of get into kind of wrapping this up. And the last point I want to make, especially in Utah, and I will say the church in general, just because the church is so worldwide, it is kind of getting away from this. But there is a lot of, like I said, pure pressure, not from just people asking you and verbally saying stuff, or maybe like setting you up on blind dates. That's a whole another discussion for another day. But the fact that like like my parents got married really young. Oh, actually, most of my siblings did not get married particularly young. My sister was the youngest, and she got married at 22. Which, to be fair, like in the church, it's like I'd probably say that's obviously towards the younger side, but somewhat close to the median. In the state of Utah, the median age I think is like 25, but I'm sure members in the church is probably slightly younger, maybe a year younger, 24. But all of my other siblings, they're like 20, 26, 27, 28, 29 when they got married. So a little bit different perspective from my side. But I could definitely see how a lot of people get pressured, especially I feel for those girls out there that are like the older sister and then their younger sister or maybe their two younger sisters get married before they do. Yeah, I couldn't even imagine that. Guys, it's a whole totally different story.
Yep. The the Rebecca to the Rachel, right?
Yep, exactly. All right, let's go ahead and so we talked about like is there pressure? Yes, no. I think everyone can generally agree yes, there is pressure to get married, specifically early, especially in the church. I'd say sure. And but I will say that the brethren lately have kind of been going away. I wouldn't say necessarily going away. They're still encouraging people to get married, but and not putting off marriage, but also no, make sure you know the person. Don't I wouldn't say they're a proponent of getting married within like 3 months or 4 months. These crazy stories that you hear at BYU. But is this pressure to get married? I'll take the early part out. Just pressure to get married. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? What do you think?
Yeah, I think there needs to be some, level of pressure. I feel like whether the pressure sometimes that people feel is self-inflicted or not, there's definitely more pressure in our church to get married a little bit earlier. Um, I think you hit on a lot of good points. Speaking for myself personally, um, it is frustrating, and I try to take a step back and realize that I can only do so much because, as you mentioned, it does require the agency of somebody else to have a marriage. So I can work on myself as much as possible, but in the end, like people will always talk about timing, and yeah, timing has a lot of to do with it. Um, so yeah, just not just being a hermit and, or as you would say, a big black pill and just swearing off dating. Looking for opportunities to meet um, girls if you're a guy, boys if you're a girl, and get to know them and see if you're compatible and try to progress and see where it can go, but also understanding that, um, as you mentioned, members of the church typically get married a lot younger than the national average, and you're not, you know, undesirable if you're not married by 23 or 24. Like, the world's not going to end. Life's going to go on. And yeah, as you mentioned, uh, you feel like you're going to be a lot more excited when that time comes to be a husband and a father because you've had the opportunity to live your single life and enjoy the bachelor life and yeah, enjoy a little bit of you time.
I agree. Yes. Just because yeah, I've kind of lived, and maybe like in a couple of years for sure, just because I just graduated and working full time, actually making money and stuff like that. But that doesn't mean I can't like, have a girlfriend and stuff like that. Would I get married tomorrow if I had the opportunity? Like, I mean, I would have to weigh out everything. I'd probably lean to probably not, but uh, yeah, definitely, I agree with you, and I do agree with you as well. It is generally a good thing. Like, a little bit of pressure on anything that makes you become a better person and shoot and strive for something higher than yourself. I think is ultimately a good thing. Now, can you take it to extremes? 100%. This doesn't mean just because you're getting pressured to doesn't mean you need to, oh, I need to marry the first person that I feel attracted to, or I feel the honeymoon phase with this one girl I dated for 3 months or 2 weeks. Like I think I need to marry her type of thing. Like no, like slow it down. Because, and this is the reason why, and I think this honestly promotes the fact that marriage is such an important decision. But like marriage is probably the single most important decision you can make in your entire life. It will affect you emotionally, financially, spiritually. This is literally the person you're going to have a family with, and specifically in a church context, eternally as well. So it is something you should probably not take very lightly. That doesn't mean you're gonna like take forever and you have to find necessarily the perfect person, but you should probably put a lot of effort into finding and filtering out maybe not as worthy candidates to find worthy candidates, and then from those that pool of worthy candidates, you can see which one kind of which cream rises to the top type of a thing. Just because I have had many instances, I've known many friends that kind of married super fast. Could have been, not saying it was, could have been out of a little bit of desperation, I will say, or FOMO for sure. hey, this person really likes me. Really like them. I'm not necessarily sure, but I don't know when the next person's going to come around that really likes me. So I'm gonna put a ring on that. And unfortunately, it didn't work for those people. But I do understand that there is risk in everything you take, and there's going to be a risk in marriage as well. It's just how it is. There's risk in any type of decision that you make, but you can definitely do stuff to make sure that decision is very high likelihood of success. Obviously, stuff changes later on. There's always the saying, and I generally think it's true, and I don't think it's a bad thing, but specifically women, they have the ability to kind of change their mind on stuff. And I do think that's true. Like whether that be in a relationship or whatever. Obviously, if you're married, you need to make sure you try to you stick to your commitments. But at the end of the day, like if you really, really don't want to be in a situation, like you're always able to leave. But I do think it is a very important decision, not take it lightly. But it is something that is good to have pressure on, just because, like you said, if you had no pressure whatsoever, then you'd kind of live your life and you'd be like, oh, there's no pressure or whatever. So a little bit of pressure, even a good amount of pressure, I think is relatively a good thing.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, some good advice I've heard is don't rush, but don't delay. You don't want to rush into like the first girl who gives you attention and that you find attractive. But if you do find a girl and you spend a lot of time together and you get to know her and you feel like you can make this work, um, don't delay it just because you want to keep living your bachelor life and uh, are afraid of the risk associated with those statistics. There are statistics, and you know once you choose your love, love your choice, and marriage takes work. So gonna be a lot of give and take, but that's just life. There's risks in everything, but the best things in life, are worth taking on risk.
If you don't risk it, you don't get the biscuit. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. All right, I think that's a really a good note to end on. A couple other points that I had, I'll just briefly mention. Like I said, unfortunately, we don't have all the data, specifically the church specific data, which I know the church has. Like said, I understand the reason why they don't publicly release that stuff. It would be really interesting to see that data, though. I will say, and also many people get discouraged with finding a spouse and dating. I mentioned this earlier because it requires someone else's agency. Just because a lot of other things in life, whether it be like your career or your job, building a business, getting into shape, a lot of other life's milestones, you're in sole control of. Meaning you put more effort in, you're probably going to get better results back. But dating and like finding a wife in our case, that does not it's not correlated. The more effort you put in doesn't necessarily mean you're going to yield better results. So that's why I'm a big proponent of making yourself the best man possible, stronger, smarter, healthier, wealthier in all aspects, physically, financially, spiritually, emotionally, socially, all of the above. That way you can kind of be the all-in-one package, and then you can have your choice. Obviously, there's still going to be attractive women or other women that are not going to be attracted to you just because, just like guys, women have preferences as well. And I want to make clear that guys can have preferences too. I think a lot of times socially, if guys have a preference, a lot of people will say, oh, you're being whatever, you're being judgmental or whatever. But women don't really have a problem having preference. So you want to make yourself the best product possible. You're basically marketing yourself. Dating is a marketing game. The better you can market yourself, and obviously you have to back up the marketing, you have to fulfill the promises that you make, the better off you're going to be. And that's why I do what I do. Why I help you guys out. Helps me, helps you. win-win situation. I think to solve the dating drama that's happening nowadays and the dating epidemic that's going around, or the lack of it, is starts with guys and ends with guys. It's like if guys can just be better, then they can attract quality women, and then quality women will meet quality men, and that will make maybe not as quality men and not as quality women want to become higher quality. It just helps everyone in general. So that's my take on it. Any last thoughts from my guest?
No, uh, iron sharpens iron. Um, you know, I think you summed it up. Don't get frustrated. Um, Pressure is good. It motivates you. It keeps you going, but don't get put so much pressure on you where it's crippling and cause you to freeze. Yeah, and like Kobe says, enjoy the process. You'll look back on, when you're eventually married and be like, yeah, I learned a lot and I grew from it personally, and now I have found my spouse and I'm happy and it all worked out.
Boom, Mamba mentality. I'll leave it at that. I want to thank my special guest. Maybe we'll invite him in the future. Maybe we're talking sports or something like that, or dating or whatever. Bring him on the show. I might even add a couple other people depending on the topic if they're willing to. So shout out to my guests. He might be back, but you know what it is. As with everything, trying to help you guys get stronger, smarter, healthier, wealthier. So go ahead, follow for more lives, follow for more tips. You know what it is. Always stay pumped. I love that sign. Never gonna get old. All right, catch y'all later. Let's cue that outro.